What makes a villain a villain? Is it their morals and beliefs? Or is it their actions that cause them to take on that role? What if their actions are seemingly justified? Does it then make it okay for someone to have done bad things if there is a good reason behind it? There is no true answer to this question because every person will answer differently. And I feel that the best written characters and stories are able to make people question these ideas themselves. Just where does one draw the line when it comes to judging whether someone is morally just in their decisions? And when have they gone too far? The newest story in Wuthering Waves 2.5 does an amazing job at presenting these themes and getting you thinking about morality and consequence, and how beautifully tragic it can be. All of the characters involved, Phrolova, Rover, and even everyone's number one op, Fenrico, are written in such a spectacularly complex and tragic way that I couldn't help but make my very first video essay about it. People are not black and white, and 2.5 is a stellar example of how showcasing this nuance in characters within your writing can create an intensely emotional and bittersweet story. From the start of Wuthering Waves, Phrolova is introduced as a mysterious but powerful member of the Resonators, an unknown global organization that serves as the main antagonistic faction of the game. The Resonators' main goal is to accelerate the quote-unquote apocalypse, believing that turning humans into monsters called tacit discords is a necessary step for human evolution. She is first seen in action at the end of Act 6, where she summons an army of tacit discords to attack Jinzo, and is shown throughout the following overarching Resonators story to have partook or been complacent in many villainous and immoral actions, with examples such as murder and human experimentation. While her specific motivations of being in the Resonators prior to 2.5 are unclear, she is presented as a villain through her affiliations and actions, and this is an indisputable fact. What is the point in bringing this up? Because it is an important fact to consider when analyzing the possible paths that they could have taken with her story. I am generalizing a bit here, but a trend that exists when it comes to writing antagonistic characters in gacha games specifically is that oftentimes the characters with truly irredeemable actions or story arcs tend to remain as non-playable characters, of which Phrolova is not. The reason for this is that playable characters in gachas are created to be sold, and there is a much easier chance of selling someone who is generally likable and unproblematic, rather than someone who is more divisive in their morals. For this reason alone, more often than not, playable characters in gachas who started off as evil tend to receive redemption arcs to develop them into, in the end, more morally good characters, and in doing so, sometimes water down their personalities and stories in the process. This was a very real concern for me when Phrolova was announced as playable. But the wuwa writers had earned my trust since the start of 2.0, so while I wanted Phrolova to remain as one of the quote-unquote bad guys, I wasn't too worried about whichever direction they would take and just eagerly anticipated what they had in store for us. And my goodness, they did not disappoint. For the sake of time, I'm not going to summarize the entirety of the Resonators story and just assume that if you are listening, you probably already know all of the lore. If not, I highly recommend that you go and play through 2.5 yourself before watching this, because I will be dumbing down the story quite a bit for the sake of this video. All you really need to know is that the protagonist character, Rover, has thus far had a very strange relationship with Phrolova as a character, due in fact to her being A member of the Resonators who has actively harmed and killed a lot of people, including our friends, and B, has been constantly trying to manipulate us and the others for the Resonators' plans. In 2.5, we are placed in a situation where we tentatively agree to work together against one of the other primary antagonists in the storyline, and throughout this tenuous partnership, we see more into Phrolova's motivations and her actual reasons for being with the Resonators in the first place. We learn that she is consumed by grief, the grief of her hometown, full of loved ones getting obliterated, with only herself emerging as the sole survivor. We learn that her plan is to essentially bring them back to life through a twisted form of experimentation, by using her power to merge monsters with fragments of people from her memories, and that the leader of the Resonators is the one who is willing to support her at her lowest. And we also learn that one of the reasons she was at her lowest was partially due in fact to us, the MC, Rover, as well. I will speak more on Rover later, but all in all, these factors would usually lead in a certain direction when it comes to the conclusion of a character's redemption arc. That the poor girl was a victim to circumstance, that she was in a horrible situation mentally, her hometown dying, and was taken advantage of by a big evil force, the Resonators, which led to her committing vile acts since she was being used, thus redeeming her as long as she shows remorse at the very end. And therein lies the most groundbreaking and pivotal part of 2.5's writing for me. The fact that Phrolova, in the final confrontation against the MC, actively acknowledges her past and who she has become, and is completely unapologetic about the decisions she has made up until this point. She, and subsequently the writers, don't try to justify anything she has done, don't blame her evil actions and decisions on anyone but herself, and have her stand her ground against the MC's ideologies in one final, tragic, yet beautiful and emotional confrontation. They give her a heart-wrenching backstory and allow us to empathize with her and her motivations. Who doesn't understand wanting to bring loved ones back to life? But they don't try to excuse all of the collateral damage and lives that she has taken in trying to make it happen. She is still a victim, to circumstance, to the Fractsidus, and inadvertently to Rover as well. But most of all, she is human and flawed, with her flaw being willing to cause chaos and harm to others just to achieve her own ends. She is in the end, still, a villain, and receives a fitting consequence for her actions up to this point. Essentially, death, cursed, or blessed, depending on how you interpret it, to forever live in that fictional world she tried to create, surrounded by echoes of loved ones that no longer exist. It is a bittersweet ending for a bittersweet tale, and to me personally, it is a perfect conclusion to her arc. The other highly important character involved in 2.5 is, as I mentioned before, the MC Rover. I know I'll have people disagreeing with me on this, but up until 2.4, I honestly found Rover quite stale as a character. There were moments where they shone, and I'll use they since Rover can be either gender, but for the most part, I found them to serve as a more stereotypical self-insert who could, for the most part, do no wrong. To be clear, there is nothing inherently wrong with this, and I know there are lots of people who enjoy characters who are more approachable and easier to relate to. But to me, seemingly perfect characters are just not as interesting. However, I have been liking Rover a lot more in the recent patches, and I feel that the Wuthering Waves writers have been doing an amazing job at writing Rover into a character who is becoming much more human. We got hints of it in 2.4, with them distrusting Lupa in the beginning stages of our partnership. But 2.5 was really our first glimpse into the fact that the MC, one of, if not the most important character in Wuthering Waves, makes mistakes and is flawed. As I mentioned before, we learned that Rover in the past was one of the contributing factors towards Phrolova being at her lowest mentally, which subsequently led to her joining the Fractsidus and everything that followed. While again, the story doesn't necessarily blame Rover for all of Phrolova's actions, it is the first time we have seen Rover, a character who has thus far only been shown to do things that end up working for the better, have one of their actions from the past have lasting, negative consequences that affect the present as well. Rover, in wiping their memory from their previous life, broke their promise to support Phrolova, which was a catalyst in her spiraling into who she is today. And that is insanely important in showing how even someone who is so morally good can have flawed perceptions of people and how they function. It shows that Rover, whose perspective we can all understand since they are merely trying to save the world, can still have ideologies that are harmful to others. It shows that every individual is unique, and how people are nuanced, and that while one's actions might be objectively fine, they can still affect some in negative ways. It shows that we, and the characters, are human. And that is what leads to such a gut-wrenching confrontation between Phrolova and Rover at the end of 2.5, where Rover tries to convince and condemn Phrolova for her ideals and actions, in which we can sympathize and understand both sides of the conflict. Rover, with their perception of life in the present, Phrolova, with her perception of life through the past, and the lack of understanding between them both, their clashing ideologies, and the devastating but inevitable fight leads to us having to stop Phrolova from causing more pain and destruction through her inevitable end. Neither side is necessarily wrong in their beliefs, and that is what makes it hurt just that much more. Lastly, shout out to my goat Fenrico, a man who went from being everyone's #1 op to everyone's #1 giga-chad. 07 to him for real. All jokes aside though, Fenrico's character arc was also amazingly well done, and I actually wish that we were able to spend a bit more time on him in 2.5 as well. If there was a character who got a redemption this patch, it was him. And due to lack of time, I can't go too much into detail for him since this video is probably already quite long. But he is another example of a character who is objectively a villain for the entirety of Resonators, yet tried their best to work for a good purpose, to save everyone. Did his motives justify his actions? Again, an unanswerable question to anyone but yourself. I would personally say no, but I could truly understand the dire situation he was forced into, and in my opinion, he also met a fitting end. Able to break free of the Thrnodians' control and believe he was helping in his final moments, yet unable to actually do so in the end. Heroes and villains should never be clear-cut, just like morality. The best written heroes are the ones that have flaws and issues and make mistakes, showcasing a relatability that everyone possesses whilst displaying heroic ideals that we can all strive for. And that kind of relatability applies to villains as well. While they inherently aren't something to aim for, villains that we can resonate with on emotional levels tend to stick with you the longest because they offer insight into the darker paths that every one of us has thought about, but has chosen not to take. On so many occasions, villains are usually people who have the best intentions, but have lost their way. Phrolova was a child who endured disaster, who was at her wit's end after losing everyone she ever cared for, who finally found a lifeline in Rover who made her feel truly understood. Rover's broken promise, the survivor's guilt, the Grand Architect, and the Fractsidus whispering immortality in her ear. Can you really blame her for succumbing to the dark path that she chose to follow? But also on the flip side, was it fair for Phrolova to push all of the responsibility of shouldering her trauma into Rover's hands? Rover is merely someone who wants to save the world, a feat which no one can fault them for. So can we really blame them for forgetting this one fleeting moment in their extremely long life while trying to achieve such an important goal? And at the end, while Rover has inherently well-meaning intentions when trying to convince Phrolova off her path, why does it feel so hypocritical and leave such a bad taste in your mouth? I think it's easy for all of us to say that we wouldn't make the same decisions and mistakes that both Phrolova and Rover made, and obviously we'd be hard-pressed to experience their specific circumstances ourselves. But the fact that we can look at them both, hero and villain, and understand, sympathize, and yet still leave us questioning what is truly right and wrong without finding a definitive answer, that to me is the mark of truly impactful writing. To end it all off, I leave you with this quote. A mountain is composed of tiny grains of earth. The ocean is made up of tiny drops of water. Even so, life is but an endless series of little details, actions, speeches, and thoughts, and the consequences, whether good or bad, or even the least of them, are far-reaching. Wuthering Waves has been through many ups and downs, especially with regards to its story writing. From a launch with stale and inconsistent pacing, all the way to today's unarguably cinematic movie experiences, it is amazing to see the improvement and decisions they have made over the past few months to deepen the world and character building. 2.5 to me proves that the writers are willing to write story and characters with depth, and I am endlessly grateful that Kuro is willing to write antagonist and protagonist characters who are nuanced and flawed. It is a brave thing to do in a gacha game, giving characters imperfections, but it allows for such intensely emotional narratives to come to light. I am of the firm belief that the tales that sit with you the longest are the ones that leave you longing for answers that cannot be given, and make you question things such as morality, good, evil, and all of the grays in between. If this is the direction that the future of Wuthering Waves is heading, then I will be eagerly anticipating whatever emotional journey that they want to take us on next. Congratulations on making it to the end. I know this is a little different from the types of videos that I normally make, but I finished the 2.5 story and it really got me thinking and left me wanting to just talk about all of these different ideas and things that came up in this video essay. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, then let me know in the comments how you guys feel about anything I said or didn't say, and just your general thoughts on the story. And also, subscribe, because I am not used to writing essays like this. I honestly didn't think I would ever write an essay ever again after finishing school, but here we are. I guess that's the power of really, really good writing. Let me know if you guys might want to see more videos like this in the future. I am not very good at writing, I don't think, but I tried my best. So hopefully this was comprehensive and you guys were able to get something out of it, because I feel like I got a lot out of the 2.5 story, obviously, as you could see from this entire video. And yeah, hopefully it was able to impact you guys just as much as it did for me. So let me know in the comments, of course. And yeah, huge shout out really quick to Captain Cabinets, my good friend who actually helped me edit, or not edit, but helped me give the essay a read to add and remove some stuff, some editing, and also my editor Sensel for editing this video, of course. My goat for real. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, YouTube. Hope you enjoyed. Again, let me know what you guys think, and here's to many more amazing stories from Wuthering Waves in the future. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. then I